All right, welcome back, Agile enthusiasts. And today on Agile with Norm, we are going to be talking about my top 10 Scrum Master tips. So these are going to be for Scrum Masters of any level. You should be able to find them helpful. Here is my top 10 tips. I have listed them in order of priority, but again, these are all very solid tips and very critical to being a great Scrum Master. So let's jump into tip number 1. Know the Scrum Guide and the Agile Manifesto. This is very important. You are the team coach as the Scrum Master, so you're there to help everybody get better at Agile, get better at Scrum. And to do that, you need to know the Scrum Guide and the 4 Agile values and the 12 principles very well. You don't really need to know the tech or even the product you're working on, because that's really not your role on the team. Your role is, again, to help everybody do Agile right. And it's not just your team, right? We should be focused on getting leaders, people attending our reviews, stakeholders. We should be trying to increase the agility of the entire organization, not just your team. The next tip is my favorite, and something I think that is absolutely critical to do, and that is to lead by example, right? You are the Scrum Master. You are supposed to really embody and represent Agile and Scrum. People are going to look to you to see how it's done. So we need to make sure we're leading by example, right? And I got a list here of some easy things to do. The first one is show up on time, right? You want your team members to show up on time? You better be showing up on time. Number 2, be a positive force, right? We want to make sure that within our team that we're being positive all the time, because if you're being positive, that's going to make it easier for others to be positive. Next, be energetic, right? If you show up and you're talking in this tired, exhausted voice, like you don't care, you don't have energy, people are going to see that and they're going to pick up on it and probably think, oh, this is okay, this is what I should do. And it's okay, we're not always positive, we're not always energetic, but as a Scrum Master, you really want to try to put that out there so others can see it, and it's going to make it easier for them to do it as well. Next on this list is have fun. I think this is probably one of the most important things for a Scrum Master to keep in mind. You want to have fun. If you're having fun, your team's going to have fun. And if everybody, has this fun, environment, it's going to make it easier to really thrive as an Agile team. And then lastly, I put here create value, and it's really to have a focus on value, right? We want to make sure that we as a team and you as an individual, we have that focus on creating value, because we're not here to just do Agile. We're not here to just do Scrum. We need to actually be creating value, because that's why we're here. The next tip kind of relates to this one a little bit. You're going to see a lot of repeating themes with it, and that is fostering the right environment and keeping the team healthy. You as a Scrum Master, your whole job is to make sure, the team is healthy and they have this environment to thrive and do Agile very well. So that means we should be having a big focus on helping everyone feel like they're part of the team and heard. We don't want them thinking, hey, I said something and nobody cared, right? We want to make sure people are feeling heard and that they feel like they're part of the team. If they don't, it's going to be difficult for that team member to really, get into the Agile, mode of doing things and really accept it. Next, make feedback normal, right? If you're familiar with Agile or Scrum, a big part of this is continuous improvement, right? So we want to be getting better. So to do that, we have to make it acceptable to have feedback, right? We don't want to have, someone give feedback and then, someone shut that person down and say, that doesn't make sense or that's stupid, right? So we want to make sure that feedback is normal and it's accepted. So it's an easy one to do. And again, the repeated themes, have fun. I can't say this enough. We can't just be all business, right? We're a team, we're humans, we like to interact and have fun. Work should be enjoyable. Next, as a Scrum Master, to really help foster that right environment and keep the team healthy, we got to protect the team sometimes. If you have a higher up manager or some stakeholder coming into the meeting, and they're being really negative and shutting the team down, how you deal with that situation is probably going to be based on the actual situation itself, so I can't comment on that. But I will say, you should be doing something, right? If it was me, I would be probably pulling that individual aside and be like, hey, look, the team worked really hard here. You said something, and it's probably not impacting the team or being digested the way you think. It's probably more impactful than you think. So that's an important one. And along with this, as a Scrum Master, you should be the team's number one cheerleader. I mean, that's part of the job, right? You got to make the team look like they are awesome. And hopefully they are, because you're being an excellent Scrum Master. Next here on my list is don't let wounds fester. So if you have an individual or two individuals, they're fighting or just negative, not literally fighting, but going back and forth with disagreements, and it's really like tearing the team apart, we probably need to take some action. And again, all of this stuff is based on the situation, so you have to be, as a Scrum Master, you have to be able to like understand what's going on and figure out a good way to address it. And that is really difficult. I mean, to be honest, working with Scrum, humans are the hard part, working with people. But in those types of situations, I would, after meeting is over, I might like call out a person at the very end and be like, hey, you got a second? And then I'd sit down and be like, hey, what's going on? It felt like something was up, something along those lines, and try to figure it out. Because that's really important. You want everyone on the team, again, feeling heard, feeling like part of the team. You don't want someone just negative and, kind of being toxic and poisoning the entire team the whole time. And then lastly here, again, number 6, it's a repeat. Keep a focus on value, right? While we're making this right environment and focusing on keeping the team healthy, everyone on the team should know that we need to have a focus on value, because again, that's why we're here. All right, next up, we've got one that I see a lot of people struggle with, both beginning and experienced Scrum Master. I see this be a problem all the time. And there's a couple concepts here to cover. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Agile police, right? As a Scrum Master, it's not really our job to run around and, say, like, be a cop and blow the whistle and say, hey, you're out of line, you're not following the Scrum Guide perfectly, or you're not following the Agile Manifesto, this value, this principle, whatever. That's huge, right? We got to make sure that we're not being that person, because I've seen Scrum Masters do that, and it just sucks the air out of the room, right? It's really hard to be that really awesome team and be performing well when you have someone who's just taking the Agile or Scrum Guide and just hitting people over the head with it. Next, the next concept, and this is sort of the other end of that spectrum. You have Scrum Masters running around being the Agile police and caring more about doing Scrum right than anything else. And then this is the other end. So you have Scrum Butt. And what that is you're doing Scrum, but you're not doing this part of Scrum. Or you're not doing this other part of Scrum. It's Scrum, but it's missing this, right? So it's important to note that when you do Scrum Butt, it really isn't Scrum, right? You start taking all of these pieces out. At some point, it's really no longer Scrum. So I like to try to make sure that people are, not on the extreme of either of these points, one or two here. Number 3, this is Shuhari. So this comes from I believe it's a Japanese martial arts concept, but it's really about mastery. And this is a good way to start out with teams that are new and Agile. And it's just a good way to approach mastery in general. So it's broken down into 3 parts. First, you have Shu. So you start out your teams with Shu. You start out following the rules. So in Scrum, that means we're following the Scrum Guide as strictly as possible. And then we get to ha, which is break the rules. So here we start, deviating a little bit from the rules. We understand them well enough that we know when we can sort of, skip something or something else. And then we get to number 3, which is re, and this is where we really transcend. We go beyond the rules, right? Maybe we switch it up. Maybe we go from Scrum to Scrumban or Kanban. We switch up the framework a little bit, or we do something so different it probably isn't Scrum anymore, but we've really taken the Agile values and principles to heart, and we're going to be able to do it and be successful doing this new Agile thing that isn't Scrum, but it came from Scrum. So that's Shuhari. It's a really awesome concept, and it's thrown around a lot in the Agile community, so it's something to really embrace, I think, especially when you're new with a team and the team's starting out. Starting with the fundamentals, the Shu is great, and then going from there until you get to the point where you can change things up pretty majorly. All right. So next up, keep things fresh and engaging. So we want to make sure that as Scrum Masters, we're always reading the room, right? If you're doing a retrospective and it's the same format that you've been doing for the last 20 retrospectives, and people are basically just showing up, they're starting to not have low energy, it's starting to get redundant and repetitive. Let's change it up, right? That's the great thing about being a Scrum Master in these frameworks, all of the Agile frameworks, Scrum especially, is you have all of these great events, and there's more than one way to do these events, right? And in fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about that on some of my future tips. All right, and next up, very related to the previous one, is improve facilitation, right? As a Scrum Master, facilitation is a huge skill set that you need. You need to be able to facilitate meetings, and you need to be able to do it well. And that means a couple of different things. The first is that we spend time prepping. I think I seen somewhere that they said, if you're doing a meeting, you should spend twice the time prepping for that meeting, preparing your content, preparing what you're going to say. I don't necessarily believe that you need to actually spend twice the time personally, at least from my experience, but I would say you need to be spending at least half of the time of your meeting. So if you have an hour meeting, you need to spend at least 30 minutes prepping for that. The other thing here too is, even once you're prepped, like right before a meeting, technically these aren't meetings, these are events, but right before an event, an Agile event, I'm usually, taking 10 or 15 minutes to prep, go through my game plan. So that's huge. Spend time prepping, have a game plan. 2, research and study, right? Facilitation, you can always improve in your facilitation, and a lot of it comes from experience, but there are other good options out there. There's a really good book that I read. I believe it's called Unlocking the Magic of Facilitation. It is, you can find it on Amazon. It's a great book. They got 11 concepts for you, but there's lots of stuff out there like that, right? You can learn a ton about facilitation and how to do it well. So definitely research and study it. It'll make you a much better Scrum Master. And then lastly on this topic, be able to pivot. I can't tell you how many times I've had a good game plan, and I've spent a lot of time prepping, and then I get in the meeting and the team, they're engaging, but they kind of want to take things in a bit of a different direction, maybe change up the technique we're using a little bit. And you got to be okay with that kind of stuff, right? Because you don't want to become someone who's, and I've seen this, I've seen Scrum Masters do this. They're just you just get so focused on the technique for your meeting that you're going to squash, team members having these great ideas and wanting to take stuff in a direction and really run with it, that you're going to care more about your technique in your plan than actually getting what you want out of your team members. And remember, that's what facilitation is all about. It's knowing how to get information out of your team members. So you need to be able to pivot. It's absolutely critical. Next up, we have Master the Retrospective. So this is the one Agile event that I really think the Scrum Master owns. I mean, Scrum Masters are involved in a lot of the other events and they often facilitate a lot of them. But the retrospective is the one that, at least for me as a Scrum Master, it's my favorite one, and I think a lot of Scrum Masters feel the same way. It is that way because this is the event where, the team is really, they're doing the continuous improvement. They're really embracing a lot of the Agile values and principles, and they're trying to get better as a team. And if you do this well, the retrospective, your team is going to become this well-oiled machine that just improves over time and keeps getting better and better. This is one of the things that can get a little stale. Often I'll see teams do the same retrospective over and over again, and there are so many different ways to do retrospectives. The most common being, you have the board, like a 3-column board saying, what went well, what didn't go well, what do we want to change, stuff like that. And there's a whole bunch of different formats for that type of board, but that's the most common technique for retrospectives, but there's a lot of other ones. So if you've done that board technique for a long time and people are just out of, they're just kind of, the energy's not there anymore, you can go to this site here that I have listed, funretrospectives.com, and they have tons of different formats for retrospectives. And there are more sites out there. Do some research. There are tons of different techniques about how to do retrospectives and keep it fresh and engaging. And that's what makes this fun as a Scrum Master for me, because I get to try out these different retrospective techniques. And of course, I'm doing that with my team in mind. I'm not just picking one that hey, this looks the most fun for me. I'm actually thinking, what would my team like? What do I think can help us improve? So this is a huge one. So again, master the retrospective. Another thing I didn't note here, but is kind of important, is that you as the Scrum Master, you can drive the retrospective to some extent. I mean, the team should be having a huge say in it. It shouldn't be you saying, hey, as a team, we need to get this better. But there have been times when I, as a Scrum Master, have gone to my team and said, hey guys, look, we committed to getting all this done at the beginning of the sprint. What happened here? And you can use, a lot of your metrics to do that, burn up, burn downs, all that kind of stuff. Look at your story points. So it is okay for being a Scrum Master to bring a topic to the retrospective. So keep that in mind as well. All right. Expand tools in the toolbox. So this is a really good tip. As an Agile practitioner, you should have a lot of tools in your toolbox, right? When it comes to stories, we have things like story mapping. When it comes to writing stories, there are all kinds of different story formats. There's the as a, I need, so that. That's like sort of the typical story format. But there are other versions out there. That one was, the one I just talked about, was more of like a user perspective story. But there are story formats that are made for jobs, right? And you should realize too, this is one of the things where I see people be the Agile police and beat team members up about this kind of stuff, but I think it's important to note that, if the user part doesn't make sense or isn't adding a ton of value, then we shouldn't be beating people up for not having it, right? If you're getting the same value without having that user, then so be it. Don't write the user part, right? So something to keep in mind. But yeah, there's a lot of different techniques out there. There's techniques for all of the events, all of the Scrum events. There's techniques for dealing with conflict. There's techniques for road mapping. When it comes to workshops, again, we have story mapping up here. So if you're not familiar with story mapping, look that up. It's a really great way to kind of make a plan for what you're going to build. tastycupcakes.org, that site there listed under number 1. This is a site where you can go and you can get a bunch of, they're basically like workshops or activities you could do with your team. And again, they're just a bunch of different techniques. So, as an Agile practitioner, I definitely recommend having a bunch of tools in the toolbox. And if you do that, when certain situations arise, you'll know, hey, this would be perfect for story mapping. This would be perfect for this type of conflict resolution. There's all kinds of good stuff out there. So make sure you're always looking at Agile tools and thinking about what you can do. And related to expanding tools is taking time to learn, right? Learning is huge for Scrum Masters, right? Just like we want our teams to be continuously improving, we should be continuously improving in our craft as a Scrum Master. And you can do that a number of different ways. There are so many certification authorities in the Agile world. There's a ton of really good ones. They're not exactly expensive. To be frank, a lot of them are easier to get, but going to these classes and listening and participating, you will learn so many techniques. You'll learn so much great information. You have the ability to network, ask questions. They are just invaluable. I strongly recommend pursuing certifications as a way to learn. It's very helpful. Some other ways to learn is podcasts. There are a lot of really good Agile podcasts out there. My favorite one in particular is the Agile Mentors. So check that one out if you're not familiar with any. That's a good one. They're short videos, really informative. YouTube's a good place to learn. And there are, again, a ton of great YouTube content out there. Hopefully you're considering me one of those. Another really good famous one is the product owner video by Henrik. I forget his last name, Keinberg, I think. But that's definitely worth looking at. He was really involved in the Spotify model. So check that one out if you're looking for YouTube resources. And then books. There is a ton of great books. And as a Scrum Master, you can look into books too for Agile coaching. There's some overlap there that's definitely worth checking out. All right. So next up, I believe this is my last one. We have to prepare for common concerns. And I say this because as a Scrum Master, I can tell you just about every team I kick off, you'll get a lot of these repeat concerns or statements from people who just don't understand it yet, or they just frankly don't want to do Agile. But I like to think, I've heard these questions enough that I need to have a good response for them and be ready for that. And a good example of that is, I'll frequently hear from teams like, oh, well, this is just a bunch of extra meetings. It's too much time in meetings. I know Scrum is a bunch of meetings. You'll hear stuff like that. And so, again, you have to think all of this stuff is unique to the situation you're in and the individual you're dealing with. And you need to know as a Scrum Master how to deal with that situation or individual to be influential, right? So I can't give you a cookie cutter answer, but you should have thought, my advice is to think about that question that will come up. I guarantee you as a Scrum Master, if you do this long enough, you will get this question. It's just a bunch of extra meetings. It's too much time in meetings. So you need to think of a way to respond to that. That's not going to really, destroy that individual's world or make them feel stupid, but, be helpful, educational, and say, hey, here's a couple examples, right? These aren't just meetings, they're events, right? These are things with purpose. Meetings are just people coming together. Who knows what's going to get done in a meeting? But events, they have specific purposes. And if you don't think an event is, helpful to you, let's talk about that with the team. Let's bring it up in our retrospective, or let's talk about it just me and you. And we'll figure out what's going on, because there might be a gap. The other thing I might do with this question, if someone's like, I'm in the meetings 80% of my work week, I work 40 hours a week and 20% of it is meetings. Well, I'll math that out, because, our planning event, our daily stand-ups, our reviews, retros, that stuff's a reoccurring meeting, and you can math it out. And when I math it out, most of the time, it doesn't exceed 10%. So it's pretty easy to be like, hey, well, I've looked at this. It seems like there should only be 10%. Are we doing other meetings for this that we're counting? Do we need to eliminate another meeting? So those are just some common examples, but think through the questions and concerns that constantly get raised and think about how to answer them. You'll find that to be very helpful as a Scrum Master. All right, so that takes us through our top 10 tips for Scrum Masters. Please go ahead, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know if I missed something big. Also, let me know future topics you'd like me to cover. I'm happy to take some community advice, feedback on topics, how I could get better, things I missed, and learn myself. All right, well, thank you all, and I'll see you next time.